Permission, I'll make a statement about the situation in Ukraine. Last night, President Putin flagrantly violated the Minsk peace agreements by recognizing the supposed independence of the so-called People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine. In a single inflammatory speech, he denied that Ukraine had any tradition of genuine statehood, claimed that it posed a direct threat to the security of Russia, and hurled numerous other false accusations and aspersions. Soon afterwards, the Kremlin announced that Russian troops would enter the breakaway regions under the guise of peacekeepers, and Russian tanks and armored personnel carriers have since been spotted. The House should be in no doubt that the deployment of these forces in sovereign Ukrainian territory amounts to a renewed invasion of that country. And by denying Ukraine's legitimacy as a state and presenting its very existence as a mortal threat to Russia, Putin is establishing the pretext for a full-scale offensive. I think honourable members will struggle to understand to contemplate how in the year 2022, a national leader might calmly and deliberately plot the destruction of a peaceful neighbour. And yet the evidence of his own words suggests that is exactly what President Putin is doing. When I said on Saturday that his scheme to subvert and invade Ukraine was already in motion before our eyes, the events of the last 24 hours have sadly shown this to be true. We must now brace ourselves for the next possible stages of Putin's plan. The violent subversion of areas of eastern Ukraine by Russian operatives and their hirelings, followed by a general offensive by the nearly 200,000 Russian troops gathered on the frontiers at peak readiness to attack. If the worst happens, then a European nation of 44 million men, women, and children would become the target of a full-scale war of aggression, waged without a shred of justification for the absurd and even mystical reasons that Putin described last night. Unless the situation changes, the best efforts of the United States, of this country, France, Germany, and other allies to avoid conflict through patient diplomacy may be in vain. From the beginning, we have tried our utmost. We've all tried to find a peaceful way through this crisis. On the 11th of February, my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary and the Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Radakin, paid the first joint visit to Moscow by the holders of their offices since Churchill, who was also Defence Minister at the time, travelled to Russia with General Allenbrook in 1944. They held over 3 hours of frank discussions with the Russian Defence Minister, General Shoigu, and the Chief of Staff, General Gerasimov, demonstrating how seriously we take Russia's security concerns, how much we respect her history, and how hard we are prepared to work to ensure peaceful coexistence. My right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, delivered the same messages when she met our Russian counterpart in Moscow on the 10th of February. I've spoken on a number of occasions to President Putin since this crisis began, so has President Biden, while President Macron and Chancellor Scholz have both visited Moscow. Together, we have explored every avenue and given Putin every opportunity to pursue his aims by negotiation and diplomacy. And I will tell the House, we will not give up. We will continue to seek a diplomatic solution until the last possible moment. But we have to face the possibility that none of our messages has been heeded and that Putin is implacably determined to go further in subjugating and tormenting Ukraine. And it is because we suspected as much that the UK and our allies repeatedly sounded the alarm about a possible new invasion, and we disclosed much of what we knew about Russia's military buildup. Britain has done everything possible to help Ukraine to prepare for another onslaught, training 22,000 soldiers, supplying 2,000 anti-tank missiles, and providing £100 million for economic reform and energy independence. We will now guarantee up to $500 million of development bank financing. I travelled to Kiev to meet President Zelensky on the 1st of February. I saw him again in Munich the weekend. I spoke to him again last night, soon after President Putin's speech, to assure him, as I'm sure the whole House would agree, was the right thing to do. I assured him of Britain's unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And now the UK and our allies will begin to impose the sanctions on Russia that we have already prepared, using the new and unprecedented powers granted by this House to sanction Russian individuals and entities of strategic importance to the Kremlin. Today, the UK is sanctioning the following 5 Russian banks: Rossiya, IS Bank, General Bank, Promzyaz Bank, and the Black Sea Bank. And we are sanctioning 3 very high net worth individuals: Gennady Timchenko, Boris Rottenberg, and Igor Rottenberg. Any assets they hold in the UK will be frozen. The individuals concerned will be banned from travelling here. And we will prohibit all UK individuals and entities from having any dealings with them. This is the first tranche, the first barrage of what we are prepared to do. And we hold further sanctions at readiness to be deployed alongside the United States and the European Union if the situation escalates still further. Last night, our diplomats joined an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, and we will raise the situation in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And let me emphasize what I believe unites every member of this House with equal determination: the resolve of the United Kingdom to defend our NATO allies is absolute and immovable. We've already doubled the size of our deployment in Estonia, where the British Army leads NATO's battle group. And when I met President Levits of Latvia and Prime Minister Kallas of Estonia in Munich on Saturday, I told them that we would be willing to send more British forces to help protect our allies if NATO makes such a request. We cannot tell what will happen in the days ahead, but, Mr. Speaker, we should steel ourselves for a protracted crisis. The United Kingdom will meet this challenge side by side with our allies, determined that we will not allow Putin to drag our continent back into a Hobbesian state of nature where aggression pays and might is right. And it is precisely because the stakes are so high that Putin's venture in Ukraine must fail, must ultimately fail, and must be seen to fail. That will require the perseverance and the unity and the resolve of the entire Western alliance, and Britain, the UK, will do everything possible to ensure that that unity is maintained. And now our thoughts should turn to our valiant Ukrainian friends who threaten no one, who ask for nothing except to live in peace and freedom. We will keep faith with them in the critical days that lie ahead. And whatever happens, Mr. Speaker, Britain will not waver in our resolve. And I commend this statement to the House.
Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday was a dark day for Europe. The Russian president denied the right of a sovereign nation to exist, unilaterally recognising separatist movements that he sponsors and who seek to dismember Ukraine. And then, under the cover of darkness, sent in troops to enforce his will. Putin appears determined to plunge Ukraine into a wider war. We must all stand firm in our support for Ukraine. We support the freedom of her people and their right to determine their own future without the gun of an imperialist held to their head. There can be no excuses for Russia's actions. There is no justification for this aggression. A war in Ukraine will be bloody, it will cost lives, and history will rightly scorn Putin as the aggressor. Putin claims to fear NATO expansion, but Russia faces no conceivable threat from allied troops or from Ukraine. What he fears is openness and democracy. He knows that given a choice, people will not choose to live under the rule of an erratic and violent authoritarian. So we must remain united and true to our values across this House and with our NATO allies. We must show Putin that we will not be divided. I welcome the sanctions introduced today and the international community's efforts to unite with a collective response. However, we must be prepared to go further. I understand the tactic of holding back sanctions on Putin and his cronies to try to deter an invasion of the rest of Ukraine. But a threshold has already been breached. A sovereign nation has been invaded in a war of aggression based on lies and fabrication. If we do not respond with a full set of sanctions now, Putin will once again take away the message that the benefits of aggression outweigh the costs. So we will work with the Prime Minister and our international allies to ensure that more sanctions are introduced. Russia should be excluded from financial mechanisms like SWIFT, and we should ban trading in Russian sovereign debt. Putin's campaign of misinformation should be tackled. Russia today should be prevented from broadcasting its propaganda around the world. And we should work with our European allies to ensure that Nord Stream 2 pipeline is cancelled. Whatever the sequencing of these sanctions, this won't be easy. Britain must work with our European allies to handle the disruption in the supply of energy and raw materials. We must defend ourselves and our allies against cyber attacks. We must bring together the widest possible coalition of nations to condemn this action against a sovereign UN member state. Ukrainians are defending their own country and democracy in Europe. We must stand ready with more military support for Ukraine to defend itself. And we must stand ready to do more to reassure and reinforce NATO allies in Eastern Europe. But we must also get our own house in order. The Prime Minister said the lesson from Russia's 2014 invasion of Donbass is that you can't just let Vladimir Putin get away with it. But until now we have. We have failed to stop the flow of illicit Russian finance into Britain. A cottage industry does the bidding of those linked to Putin, and Russian money has been allowed to influence our politics. We have to admit that mistakes have been made. We have to rectify them. This must be a turning point, an end to oligarch impunity. We need to draw a line on Companies House, providing easy cover for shell companies. We need to ensure our anti-money laundering laws are enforced. We need to crack down on spies. And we have to make sure money isn't pouring into UK politics from abroad. Russian aggression has now torn up the Minsk Protocol and the Budapest Memorial. But even at this late hour, we must pursue diplomatic routes to prevent further conflict. So can the Prime Minister tell us what international diplomatic efforts are going on and what role the UK will have in that process? Mr. Speaker, we know Putin's playbook. He seeks division. We must stay united. He believes the benefits of aggression outweigh the consequences, so we must take a stand. And he believes the West is too corrupted to do the right thing, so we must prove him wrong. I believe we can, and I offer the support of the opposition in that vital endeavour. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the right honourable gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, for the clarity with which he has just spoken and the support that he has given to the UK's strategy in dealing with this crisis in Europe. And I think, if I may say so, that that will be noted, and the change in the approach taken by the opposition is I think, massively, over the last couple of years, Mr. Speaker, is massively beneficial. The change over the last couple of years, Mr. Speaker, which I think that a fair-minded person would acknowledge. And he's raised some important questions, and they relate to the ways in which we clamp down on Russian money in the UK and indeed throughout the West. And this country was the first to publish a register of beneficial ownership. This country has led the way in cracking down on on wealth that is unexplained, and we are bringing forward an economic crime bill to take forward further measures, Mr. Speaker. And I think I should understand it is absolutely vital that we hold in reserve further powerful sanctions, as I think the right honourable gentleman acknowledged, in view of what President Putin may do next. And we want to stop Russian companies from being able to raise funds in sterling or indeed in dollars, Mr. Speaker. We want to stop them raising funds on UK markets, and we want to strip away the veil that conceals the ownership of property in this country and indeed throughout the West. And we will work with our friends and partners around the world to achieve that. And the sanctions we're implementing today are very tough. Promziaz Bank is a top 10 Russian bank, and it services 70% of state contracts signed by the Russian Ministry of Defense. But the measures that we have prepared are much, much tougher still, and we will have absolutely no hesitation in implementing them. Mr. Speaker, we will get on with the business of diplomacy, and he's absolutely right to draw attention to the importance of diplomacy now, in spite of everything that is happening on the borders of Ukraine and now in Donbass. There is a G7 meeting straight after this statement, Mr. Speaker. We will be holding meetings in NATO, in the P5, and in every forum where it is relevant and possible to bring President Putin to understand the gravity of what he is doing. The UK will continue to offer support to our Ukrainian friends, and I do think it has been right for us to be out in front in offering military assistance, defensive military assistance to the Ukrainians. I think that has been the right thing to do. I spoke last night to President Zelensky, who made further requests, and we will consider them. We're doing everything we can to offer support in the time that we have, and we will do that. But I just think it is worth, and I'm glad that the right honourable gentleman seemed to support that as well. It is absolutely vital in this critical moment that President Putin understands that what he is doing is going to be a disaster for Russia. And it is clear from the response of the world to what he has done already in Donbass that he is going to end up with a Russia that is poorer as a result of the sanctions that the world will implement. A Russia that is more isolated, a Russia that has pariah status, Mr. Speaker. No chance of holding football tournaments in a Russia that invades sovereign countries, Mr. Speaker. And a Russia that is engaged in a bloody and debilitating conflict with a fellow Slav country. What an appalling result for President Putin, Mr. Speaker. I hope that he steps back from the brink and does not conduct a full invasion. But in the meantime, Mr. Speaker, we must implement the tough package that we put forward, and we will continue to offer the Ukrainian people all the support that we can.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome my right honourable friend's statement and also welcome the UK's unwavering support for Ukrainian sovereignty at this gravest of times, which shows we can never take our eyes off Russia. But does my right honourable friend share my concern that while the focus today is rightly on protecting Ukrainian independence and territorial integrity, what lies behind this is a wider worldwide trend of authoritarian states trying to impose their way of thinking on others, and that the battle in which we must now engage is nothing more nor less than the defence of democracy itself.
My right honourable friend is entirely right, and that is what is at stake. And what happens in Ukraine, what is happening in Ukraine now, is being watched around the world, and the echoes will be heard in Taiwan, in East Asia, and throughout the world.
We now come to the leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement, and to the National Security Advisor who has briefed opposition leaders. Mr. Speaker, this is a dark day for the people of Ukraine and for people right across our European continent. Europe stands on the brink of war as a consequence of Russian aggression. It is a day that communities across Scotland, right across these islands, and indeed across Europe, desperately hoped would never come to pass. But although that sense of darkness defines today, how we now collectively respond will define the days to come. This chamber, especially during recent months, has seen fierce debate and disagreements. But today, I think it's important to say, in the face of Russian aggression against Ukraine, that in this House, that we all stand together. Stand together and stand with our partners across Europe and indeed across the globe. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, we stand with the Ukrainian people who are now under assault. A European country, an ally, is under attack. We should be very clear about what is now happening. This is an illegal Russian occupation of Ukraine, just as it was in Crimea. Russia has effectively annexed another 2 Ukrainian regions in a blatant breach of international law. This effectively ends the Minsk process. It is a further violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. No one should even repeat the Russian lie that this is about peacekeeping. Mr. Speaker, this is warmongering, plain and simple. President Putin must hear the call from here and elsewhere to draw back before any further escalation can take place. Mr. Speaker, I and my party welcome the sanctions that are now being brought forward, but it's deeply regrettable that the delay has allowed many Russian individuals to shift dirty assets and money in the last number of weeks. But can I ask the Prime Minister specifically if the Russian state and individuals will immediately be suspended from the SWIFT payment system? And just as economic sanctions against Russia are welcome, Ukraine needs immediate economic and indeed humanitarian support if required. When will economic and humanitarian support be enacted, and what will it entail? Can the Prime Minister also confirm that there will be exemptions for partners of UK citizens residing in the Ukraine to come to the United Kingdom? They need that certainty, and they need it today. In the days ahead, we can no doubt expect a barrage of disinformation from the Russian media and its proxies. So can the Prime Minister update on how the United Kingdom government intends to combat that threat? This is also the moment to end the complacency in implementing the Security Committee's Russia report. Will the Prime Minister now commit to its full implementation and update the House accordingly? Can I also ask the Prime Minister that after the UN Security Council meeting last night, the brief meeting, when it will next meet, and what coordination is happening across all international organisations to force President Putin to step back from the brink before it is too late? Finally, let President Putin hear loudly and clearly that he must now desist from this act of war, this attack on a sovereign nation. Let us all demonstrate that we stand with the people of Ukraine.
Mr. Speaker, can I wholeheartedly thank the right honourable gentleman for the terms in which he has just spoken, the unity and the resolve that he has that he has just shown in common with the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition. I think the spirit that this House is showing today is absolutely invaluable, and he's right to raise questions about the speed in which we've been able to sanction various individuals. We did bring forward the Magnitsky sanctions, as he knows, and he was important in that last year. We are bringing forward the registry of beneficial ownership faster than any other country, stripping away the veil on Russian dirty money. He asked about support for Ukraine. As I mentioned to the House, we've given £100 million worth of support, particularly for Ukraine's energy crisis and also for other economic needs, plus the further $500 million that I announced just now. And Mr. Speaker, the diplomatic effort is now intensifying. He asked about the forums in which they're taking place. There are more meetings in the UN, but ultimately, as he rightly says, this is up to Vladimir Putin. He and he alone can decide whether or not to halt what seems to be an absolutely irresistible march towards tragedy. It's down to him. It's in his head.
Can I just say, I'm expecting to run this to around 2 o'clock, so 12 each other, short questions and certainly pithy answers would certainly be helpful. Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I welcome my right honourable friend's statement today and indeed the actions of he and his government over these recent weeks. May I pay particular tribute to the Defence Secretary, whose unfailing efforts in preparing not just the people of Ukraine but our allies in NATO for this aggression has been exemplary. May I ask, as we are talking about sanctions today, and rightly so, whether my right honourable friend will also commit to a Foreign Agents Registration Act. We have seen the action of the insidious work of the United Front for China and indeed of different outfits for Russia to undermine our democracy and threaten our way of life. Would he please bring in that act? And while he is doing it, would he finance much more the Russian service of the BBC so that the Russian people can hear the truth and not the lies that are being spread by their own government?